Yes.
When you think about Wandia at 3 years old, what was she like?
So at 3, my father, who's Kenyan, was posted to Washington, D.C. He was the commercial attaché
Oh, wow.
at the Kenyan embassy in Washington. And my mother, who's Canadian, followed. And at that point, I had an older brother and 2 younger brothers.
Right.
And so imagine at 3, my mother was having children one after the other. So we were 4. I was the only girl.
Yes.
And I think I was very invisible. Like my mother was completely overwhelmed with raising these kids, taking care of the house. We didn't have any house help, cooking, cleaning. I have pictures of myself with my hair completely unkempt and my baby teeth had gaps in them. It's not even funny. Don't laugh. They have gaps because those were cavities because our teeth were never brushed. Like I think we were neglected and not out of malice.
Yes.
I just think she just couldn't cope.
It was
and
the
so yeah, I mean, I've tried figuring out why I have some of the dysfunctions I have, and it takes me back to being 3,
Incredible.
3, 4, and feeling like no one really saw me.
That's incredible.
But I don't want to make it sound like she was a bad mother. She was really doing her best, but it was hard. It was hard.
What was it like growing up as immigrant child, basically, and spending some time in the U.S. while Dad was there?
I don't remember. I mean, we left when I was 6.
Right.
So I don't remember feeling different.
Right.
I mean, being mixed race, I think when I came back to when we moved back to Kenya, because I was 6.5, and in Kenya, white people are called Mzungu.
Yes.
And so even though I'm not white, when I started going to school here,
Yes.
all the other kids were like, Mzungu, you're Mzungu, you're this. And I was like, what? Why are they calling me white? I'm not white. So I think that was more of a bit of a shock, like being seen as different from other kids, even though I didn't really see myself as different.
When you were younger, framing your identity, what did you see yourself as?
I think when you're very young, you're just you. You know what I mean? Like your mother's your mother, your father's your father. But yeah, I think, like I said, in Kenya, the majority of Kenyans are full African, and I was because I had a white mother, that somehow made you a little bit different. It didn't mean our lifestyle was different. Like we didn't have money, or my dad was a civil servant. My mom was a teacher at a government school, so there wasn't much money, but it still meant that you sort of were a little different.
So, as you got older,
yes,
how did you choose the path you would later follow? This path of
entrepreneurship.
His mom and dad were, civil servants. You would have had a different. They would have had a different perspective to life than the life you're living now.
So my dad was a wannabe entrepreneur.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this.
So he started tons of businesses. Like we had so many businesses that were registered. And when he passed away, it was like all these businesses.
You got to close them down now.
But they hadn't ever done anything.
Oh my God.
So he was a dreamer, and he saw opportunities, but he wasn't able to execute on them.
Wow.
But he would talk about ideas, and he would start, and he had ideas. His ideas were always, he had an idea to do educational toys at one point, or, he wanted to, he wanted to build real estate. There were things he wanted to do, and he would talk about. But no, he never actually implemented. And I think I wasn't conscious of it at the time. Like when I was making choices, I wasn't saying, oh, I want to be like dad, or I want to be like mom. But when I look back at the things I did do, they were very similar to what my dad had done. So I did it. My first degree was economics.
Wow.
He was a civil servant for the Kenyan government. I became a civil servant working for multinationals,
Yes.
well, multilateral
Yes.
organizations and for the British government.
Right.
And he was very interested in development.
Right.
And so I only became an entrepreneur in my mid 40s.
Right. Right.
So for my first 20 plus years,
Yeah.
I worked in international development.
100%. Yeah.
And I would remember conversations with my dad when he was working for the Kenyan government, and he would travel, he'd go to India, he'd come back and he'd say, oh, there's so much Africa can learn from these other places. And he went to Chile once, I think in the 1970s. And he was like, these guys were as poor as we were, and look how far they've come. And this is before I think Chile went through its own whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, he would go to all these places, and he wasn't home often, but when he was home, those were the kind of conversations we'd have. Or when we'd go on holiday, he would put us into the car and drive us to factories.
Oh, wow.
To go and see. And in those days, there was very vibrant textile factories.
Yes.
In Kenya. A lot of them shut down.
Shut down since,
but, factories that would make suits for men, and the fabric even was being produced in the factories. So he was always interested in, business, in productivity, in outcomes. But he was a heavy drinker. I think that got in the way.
When you say he would drive you down,
yes,
would drive to factories, I imagine this is long before cars had seatbelt rules.
Yeah, and we were many. We were like,
I knew that was coming.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we never had a station wagon, so it was a saloon car, and then you'd be like,
what car was it?
5. It was a Volvo.
Oh dear! It was one of those tin can ones, isn't it? That square shape.
But they were known to be safe.
Yes. Well.
We always believed and my dad wrote off 3 Volvos and never got a scratch.
Wow.
So we believe that Volvos were, the safer car.
You said a few things about Dad.
Yeah.
If you'll allow me to double click. The first thing you said is he was a dreamer.
Yes.
Did you ever see him dream out loud? Was that something he ever did with you as kids?
Not in a sort of like, let's sit down and dream together,
this,
but he would say, "Oh, we're going to do this, or we're going to do that," and then it wouldn't happen. Yeah. Which
is that? Do you think often about that in how you live your life? That you're not the person who just says and then doesn't follow through?
I don't like. I like to deliver on my promises, especially to my kids. I think it's better to underpromise and overdeliver. I think I like to live with that sort of philosophy, because otherwise you're constantly disappointing someone.
It's so good.
Yeah.
A hard discipline to learn, though.
Yeah. But sometimes, and that's what I'm saying, it's better not to say you're going to do it unless you're pretty certain
that you are.
That you will do it. And like I said, the younger the child, the more I think it bothers them if you're not doing what you say you're going to do. And that sort of teaches you, I think it teaches you not to expect, which I don't think that's a good thing. I think you should have expectations.
Did you ever find in how you lived life that you might have encountered with people, either personal or in business, and immediately if they exhibited the behaviors of a dreamer who doesn't follow through, that is something that would
irk me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe unfairly so.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I might have this I have a definite bias towards action and delivery and execution. I think I'm more drawn to people who say less and do more than, a lot. I think that some people are very gifted at talking. And actually I think I think in business it helps when you pair those people up. So some people are great at seeing the ideas. But then if they're not good at executing, then they need to find someone to sort of work beside them who can deliver. Yeah.
You said Dad was a heavy drinker. How do you know?
Because he came home drunk most nights. Yeah. Actually, some nights he'd be so drunk that he wouldn't even get out of the car. So he'd fall asleep, he'd literally get the car into the,
And then he's out.
and then he'd pass out,
out.
and we'd wake up to go to school the next day and find him sleeping, like
Wow.
in the car from the night before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where was mom in all this?
Working, trying to pay the bills.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, dad provided the home.
Yeah.
I think the deal was he was supposed to have done the home and school fees.
Yeah.
And then she would do like food and
Sure.
clothing and
Sure.
stuff like that. But then slowly, these are a lot of questions. Well, anyway, I don't mind. I think it's in, you know, so there'd be times that we would be called back at school.
Oh no.
So assembly time.
Oh no, man.
Can the following people stay behind?
Oh no.
Because school fees hadn't
Hasn't
been
been paid.
paid. And then we'd get home, we'd be sent home, and my mom would say, I'll have to pay it. And she'd have to find the money. So then
My God.
my dad would, I think subconsciously be like, oh, I guess you can afford to pay school fees now. So that's no longer my responsibility. But what it meant is that my mom ended up having to take on extra work. So she was a teacher in a classroom in a school during the day, and then she would do extra tuition in the evenings. And so some nights she wouldn't be getting home until 9, 10 o'clock at night from the extra classes.
My God. My God.
What did I learn from that? I think I appreciated it, but I was almost angry at her for not pushing back harder. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think if my dad hadn't been there, it would have been one thing.
But he was there.
But he was there.
Yeah.
And I think she, you know, in some ways, and I don't think it would have been easy, but I know women who would, in her shoes, would have just said, let the kid stay home until he picks up his socks and does what he's supposed to do, you know?
Yeah.
And that reinforces the message to him, this is your responsibility.
Yeah.
But my mom took it on.
Yeah.
We'd come home, electricity would have been cut off.
Yeah, sure.
My mom would then pay. And then now he's off the hook. So she kept letting him off the hook.
Something tells me you're not a let him off the hook kind of gal. I feel like you're the kind of girl who's like, oh, I'm going to keep the hook there. Whatever the hook is. If you and I are committed, and it may, both in personal, but also in business, I feel like you're the kind of person who's like, if there is a commitment that's been made on either end, I'm going to hold you to it.
I think it's important. I mean, I'm not saying that I would leave my children on the side of the road.
Sure.
You know, and I haven't had to. Sure. Luckily, I've never been in that situation where I've had to let my children suffer because of trying to hold on to this principle. So and that's why I'm saying maybe it's a bit unfair for me I don't want to judge my mother's choices too harshly. But it's complicated, you know, it's complicated. And she was doing the best she could at the time. Like, she felt that was the right decision. But I look back, I think her hardest years were when we were sort of teenagers, young, you know, sort of from the age of about